They thought he was just another black man to silence, another body to pin down under the weight of their boots. What they didn't know was that his wife was already coming, and she was not coming alone. Marcus Hale had always been a man of words, not fists. As a professor of history at a prestigious university, he believed in teaching America about its past so it could heal its present. But on that cold night, the police didn't see a professor. They saw skin. They saw a threat. His lecture notes still sat in the passenger seat of his car, pages filled with the stories of Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, and Martin Luther King Jr., but none of those names mattered to the officers who dragged him from his car, pressed his cheek against the pavement, and unleashed their rage. The first crack of the baton stunned him more from betrayal than pain. He had taught their children, stood in front of auditoriums filled with young faces who carried the future. Now the guardians of law and order treated him like prey, like the very history he warned them not to repeat. "Stop resisting." One officer barked as Marcus struggled to breathe with a knee crushing his chest. He wasn't resisting. He was drowning. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in a nearby shop window. Blood streaked across his forehead, his lips trembling between pain and prayer. In that moment, he wondered if the history books would reduce him to another statistic. But Marcus had something they didn't expect. Lena, his wife, a commander in the city's elite SWAT division, carried a fury sharper than any weapon. She had kissed him goodbye that evening, teasing him for grading papers too late, promising dinner would be waiting. Now her phone vibrated with the call that shattered everything. "Your husband's in custody," a voice said coldly, but Lena could hear the unsaid truth in the hesitation, the ugly pause that spoke of brutality. She didn't waste time with questions. Within minutes, her team was in motion. Sirens screamed as armored trucks cut through the night, the golden lights of the city reflecting against their helmets and rifles. Lena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. She was not just a wife tonight. She was justice armed. Inside the precinct, Marcus barely clung to consciousness. He heard laughter, the kind that strips away humanity. An officer leaned close, whispering venom into his ear. "You people never learn. Stay in your place." Marcus wanted to answer, to remind them of the place his ancestors carved out of chains and fire, but words failed as blood filled his mouth. The walls echoed with his silence, but outside, the storm was coming. 5 minutes. That was all it took. The squad cars parked haphazardly in front of the building were suddenly drowned in floodlights as black-clad figures emerged, weapons raised with precision. The precinct, once a fortress of unchecked authority, found itself encircled by a force greater than fear, accountability. Lena stepped forward, her voice slicing through the megaphone with steel and sorrow. "Release Professor Hale." Now, inside, chaos rippled through the officers who had worn arrogance like armor. Their laughter died, replaced by the stench of panic. Marcus, barely awake, felt the shift in the air. Hope. It was faint, but it was golden, like the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. He knew Lena had arrived. He knew he was not alone. What happened in those next moments would decide more than his fate. It would decide whether the city learned, whether the cycle could finally be broken. For Marcus, lying bruised and broken, the story was not about vengeance. It was about survival, about love stronger than hate, about a wife who would move the earth to bring him back, and about a system that could no longer pretend not to see. The precinct had always felt untouchable, a brick fortress in the center of the city that had grown used to people bowing their heads as they walked by. Tonight, for the first time in decades, it trembled. Lena stood in front, her tactical vest strapped tightly, her voice echoing across the parking lot. "This is not a request. Release him now." Her team of heavily armed officers fanned out around her, each one trained to handle hostage crises, terrorists, and cartel strongholds. But none of them had ever been ordered to surround a police station filled with their own colleagues. The irony wasn't lost on them. Inside, Sergeant Donovan cursed under his breath. He had been the one barking orders when Marcus Hale was dragged in. He had been the one who struck first, his baton swinging not from fear, but from entitlement. And now, his arrogance was crumbling as the daughter of justice herself stood outside demanding his prisoner. "What the hell is she doing?" he snapped. A younger officer shifted nervously. "That's Commander Hale, sir." His wife. The words hit like bullets. Donovan's grip tightened on his baton, as if the wooden stick could shield him from the tidal wave approaching. Marcus, slumped against the holding cell bars, opened his swollen eyes. The world blurred in streaks of red and gold. He could hear the muffled chaos outside, Lena's voice cutting through like a sword. For the first time since the beating began, a small smile flickered on his cracked lips. They had underestimated love. One officer, guilt clawing at his insides, whispered to another, "We can't keep him here. This is going to explode." But Donovan growled back, "Nobody moves until I say so. If we let him go, we're finished." Fear had taken root in the precinct, and not the kind they were used to wielding. Outside, Lena advanced a step closer, her team's rifles lowering just enough to signal readiness. She wasn't bluffing. The world had changed in 5 minutes. Across the city, news vans screeched to a halt. Reporters scrambled out, cameras rolling as the floodlights lit the building like a stage. Social media erupted. Screens across the country lit up with the image of a black woman in SWAT gear demanding the release of her battered husband from the very institution sworn to protect him. The precinct's brick walls could no longer contain the truth. Inside the holding cell, Marcus forced himself upright, each breath a knife in his chest. He thought of his students, of the young men and women who trusted him to tell them that progress was possible. He wondered if they were watching now, if they could see the price of speaking truth in a land still chained by old hate. "Lena," he whispered hoarsely, though she couldn't hear him. "Do what you must." Lena's earpiece crackled with her second-in-command's voice. "Ma'am, the precinct's refusing communication. What are your orders?" She inhaled sharply, steadying herself. In her mind, images of Marcus teaching, laughing, living, collided with the bloody face she imagined behind those walls. She had sworn an oath to the law, but the law had already broken itself tonight. "Prepare breach protocol," she said. Her words silenced her team for a heartbeat. Breaching a police precinct was unthinkable, but Lena wasn't thinking like a commander. She was thinking like a wife. Inside, Donovan barked, "Shut the blinds. Lock it down." Officers scurried, but the fear in their movements betrayed them. The building no longer felt like a fortress, it felt like a trap. In the corner, Officer Ramirez clenched his jaw. He had joined the force to protect people like Marcus, not destroy them. Watching the professor bleed while Donovan laughed had already shattered something in him. And now, seeing Lena outside, Ramirez felt his conscience roar back to life. He approached the holding cell, keys trembling in his hand. "Professor Hale," he whispered, "I'm getting you out." Marcus raised his battered face, struggling to focus. "Why now?" "Because this isn't who I am," Ramirez muttered. But as he slid the key toward the lock, Donovan's voice thundered from across the hall. "Step away." Ramirez froze, his hand still on the key, his heartbeat hammering. Donovan stormed closer, eyes ablaze. "You think you're some kind of hero?" "He stays. We all stay." The tension coiled tighter, every officer in the precinct torn between loyalty to a badge and the truth unfolding outside. Lena's voice roared again through the megaphone. "You have 30 seconds. Cameras zoomed in on her face, every line of anguish and fury etched into history. The countdown began not just for Marcus's life, but for the soul of the city. Donovan spun around to his men. "Guns up. They won't dare fire on us." But deep down, he knew the world was watching. If a single shot rang out tonight, there would be no hiding, no twisting of the story. The golden light spilling over the horizon seemed to mock his certainty. Ramirez made his choice. With a sudden push, he turned the key and swung the cell door open. Marcus staggered forward, nearly collapsing, but Ramirez caught him. "Go," Ramirez urged, his voice shaking. Donovan's face went red with rage. "You're finished." "No," Ramirez shot back. "You are." The building erupted in shouting, officers pointing weapons at each other, decades of silence crumbling in a single breath. Marcus, barely able to walk, leaned on Ramirez as they moved toward the front. Every step felt like defiance, every drop of blood marking the floor like scripture. Outside, Lena's finger hovered over her comm button. She saw movement in the doorway. At first, her heart clenched, fearing they were bringing her husband out in chains. Then she saw him broken, bruised, but standing. For the first time in her career, Lena dropped her weapon and ran. Cameras captured the moment as she caught Marcus in her arms, his body collapsing into hers. The city exhaled in unison. But Donovan wasn't finished. His rage boiled over into desperation. He charged out of the precinct, pistol in hand, shouting, "He doesn't leave here alive." The world slowed. Every lens turned. Every heart stopped. Marcus, barely conscious, whispered against Lena's ear, "Don't let them write the ending." Lena's instincts screamed. In one fluid motion, she shielded Marcus with her body and barked an order to her team. "Stand down." It wasn't bullets that would end Donovan. It was the truth. Dozens of cameras captured his twisted face, his gun raised against an unarmed, bloodied professor. The people saw. The nation saw. And for the first time, the mask of power slipped live on air. Donovan froze, realizing too late that he had lost not just control, but the narrative. His weapon shook, his breath ragged, as the floodlights bathed him in gold. Lena's voice cut through the silence, calm and unyielding. "Drop it." The words carried not just the weight of law, but of history demanding reckoning. Donovan's hand trembled. Then, under the gaze of the world, the gun clattered to the ground. The crowd outside erupted not in cheers, but in a roar of release, of decades of pain finally seen. Marcus, fading into Lena's arms, let out a whisper that carried farther than he knew. "We're not invisible anymore." And as the dawn broke fully, the golden light swallowed the precinct, turning the night of brutality into a morning of reckoning. The gun lay on the asphalt, its metallic clatter still ringing in the silence. Donovan's chest heaved, his arrogance drained into a sickly shade of fear as the cameras locked on him. The crowd outside the barricades erupted in fury, voices like thunder crashing against the brick walls of the precinct. Some shouted for his arrest, others for his resignation, and many simply cried out, finally seeing in real time the violence they had long known but the world had too often ignored. Lena held Marcus tighter, feeling the weakness in his body, the shallow rhythm of his breath. His blood stained her gloves, seeping into her skin as if to remind her of what was at stake. She pressed her forehead against his, whispering fiercely, "Stay with me. You're not done yet." Marcus's eyelids fluttered, his gaze catching the golden floodlights above them. His lips curled into the faintest of smiles. "History," he murmured, "is watching." Paramedics rushed forward, pushing through the line of armored officers. For a split second, Lena wanted to refuse, to keep him in her arms forever, but she forced herself to let go. They lifted Marcus onto a stretcher, his body fragile, but his spirit burning through the pain. Donovan stumbled backward, sweat dripping down his temples. His fellow officers no longer rallied to his side. Instead, they stood frozen, their faces a canvas of shame and doubt. Ramirez stepped forward, his voice clear and loud enough for the cameras. "Sergeant Donovan ordered the attack. He told us to teach him a lesson." We all heard it. The words cut deeper than any blade. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and reporters scrambled to beam the confession across the nation. Donovan lunged at Ramirez, spitting curses, but was quickly restrained by two officers who finally chose the badge's true meaning over its corrupted shadow. Handcuffs clicked around Donovan's wrists, the irony unmistakable. A man who had weaponized authority now stood shackled under the gaze of the people he once terrorized. Lena straightened, her tears hidden behind steel resolve. She addressed the cameras directly, her voice unshaken. "My husband is a professor, a teacher, a father. He was beaten because of the color of his skin, nothing more. Tonight, this city and this country must decide if justice is real or just a word." Her statement traveled faster than the speed of light, sparking conversations in living rooms, classrooms, and government halls across the nation. But inside the ambulance, Marcus drifted between consciousness and shadows. The siren's wail echoed like a hymn, each beat of his heart a reminder of survival. In his mind, he saw the faces of his students, their eager eyes begging him for guidance. He thought of the lecture he had been preparing on Reconstruction, on promises broken after emancipation. And he realized, with bitter clarity, that his body was now another text for them to study. At the hospital, Lena refused to leave his side. Doctors worked feverishly, stitching wounds, stabilizing his ribs, and treating his concussion. Each monitor beep was a reminder of fragility, but also of persistence. Hours passed, and the world outside did not rest. Protests erupted in major cities. Candlelight vigils lit the night, streets filled with chants of his name, not because Marcus had sought attention, but because his suffering had become the vessel of a larger truth. Back at the precinct, the mayor arrived, flanked by aides and cameras. His polished words dripped with urgency. This city will not tolerate racism in its police force. We will seek justice for Professor Hale. But his eyes betrayed calculation, a man balancing outrage with politics. Ramirez, however, stood firm before reporters. He recounted every moment, his voice trembling yet unwavering. I saw him bleeding. I saw Sergeant Donovan laughing. And I knew if I stayed silent, I would be no better than him. His confession struck chords nationwide, inspiring other officers in other cities to speak out, to finally expose the rot festering inside the badge. Lena, watching the broadcast from Marcus's hospital room, felt both pride and sorrow. Change was stirring, but it came at the cost of her husband's blood. In the quiet of the room, Marcus stirred, his voice weak but deliberate. Lena. She leaned closer, holding his hand. I'm here. Don't let them make this about me alone, he whispered. It's bigger than us. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. I know, but I'll fight for you first, then for all the others. His fingers squeezed hers faintly, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of peace cross his face. Outside the hospital, thousands gathered, holding signs that read, Justice for Marcus, End Racist Policing, and No More Silence. Golden candles lit the night sky, reflecting off windows like stars fallen to earth. A movement had begun, not because Marcus had chosen it, but because history had chosen him. Donovan, now locked away in a county cell, raged against the walls, insisting he was the victim of political theater. But the evidence was overwhelming: video footage, Ramirez's testimony, and the undeniable image of Marcus's battered face. For once, denial could not erase truth. In the following days, the precinct became a place of reckoning. Investigations were launched, suspensions handed out, and community leaders demanded structural reform. The old fortress had crumbled, brick by brick. In the Hale household, silence became sacred. Lena spent hours at Marcus's bedside, whispering stories of their children, of the future waiting for him. She brushed his hair back, kissed his bruised knuckles, and read aloud the letters pouring in from strangers across the nation. One letter, from a young student, pierced her heart. Professor Hale, you taught us that history bends toward justice. Please wake up and see it bending because of you. Marcus smiled faintly when she read it, whispering, Then I have to get better. I can't leave the story unfinished. And so, with each sunrise, he healed. Slowly, painfully, but with unyielding determination. The golden light that had once symbolized hope outside the precinct now streamed through his hospital window, bathing him in warmth. It was as if the world itself refused to let him fade. The trial became the theater of a nation. Cameras lined the courthouse steps, protesters filled the streets with chants and songs, and every news network framed Marcus Hale as the symbol of a reckoning long overdue. The image of him entering the courthouse, leaning on a cane, Lena by his side in her SWAT uniform, became iconic. It was not just a trial of Donovan. It was a trial of the system itself. Inside, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Donovan sat at the defense table, his arrogance replaced by sullen bitterness. His lawyer painted him as a man caught in chaos, a scapegoat for the country's anger. But then Ramirez took the stand. His voice did not tremble this time. I saw Sergeant Donovan order the beating. I heard his words. He told us to make an example out of Professor Hale. Gasps echoed, pens scribbled, cameras flashed. The jury leaned forward. When Marcus took the stand, silence swallowed the room. He moved slowly, each step deliberate, each breath hard-won. But when he sat down, his voice carried the strength of centuries. I am not here for revenge, he began. I am here because my blood should not be the ink of yet another forgotten chapter. I am a professor, a husband, a father. But that night, to Donovan and to too many others, I was only a color. And that cannot stand anymore. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. This trial is not just about me. It is about every black man and woman who was told to stay small, stay silent, stay invisible. We will not. His words spread far beyond the courtroom. Across the country, classrooms replayed them, Churches echoed them, marches sang them. The jury deliberated for only 6 hours before returning. Guilty on all counts. When the verdict was read, Donovan's face twisted in disbelief, but the cheers outside drowned out his curses. Lena held Marcus's hand tightly, both of them crying, not from victory, but from the release of years of held breath. That night, Marcus returned home, still wounded but alive, surrounded by friends, students, neighbors, and strangers who had all come to honor him. A candlelight vigil stretched down the street, golden flames flickering like stars refusing to fade. Marcus stood at the window, cane in hand, watching the light. "Do you see it?" Lena asked softly. "I do," he whispered. "It's what I've been teaching my whole life." History bends slowly, painfully, but tonight, it bent a little more. Weeks later, he returned to his classroom. His students rose in a standing ovation, some with tears, others with clenched fists of solidarity. Marcus smiled, though scars lined his face, and spoke the words that had carried him through darkness. "We are not invisible. We never were. And we will not be silent." His lectures became more than history lessons. They became testimonies. Each scar on his body became proof of resilience. Each word he spoke became a torch passed to the next generation. Lena, standing at the back of the room, felt pride radiate through her. She had seen him nearly broken, and now she watched him rebuild not only himself, but the world around him. Donovan sat in prison, his name etched into the annals of disgrace. The precinct underwent sweeping reforms, old leaders swept away, community oversight introduced. It was not perfection, but it was a start. And Marcus knew better than anyone that history was not made of perfect moments, it was made of people refusing to give up. On the anniversary of that night, Marcus and Lena stood together at a rally downtown. Thousands gathered, golden banners waving in the wind, candles lighting the streets. Marcus spoke once more, his voice steady, his spirit unbroken. "1 year ago, I was left bleeding on the pavement. Tonight, I stand before you, not because of hate, but because of love. Love that refused to let me go. Love that stood outside a precinct and said no more. Love that carried me back to life." The crowd roared, not in anger, but in unity. The golden light of the setting sun bathed the scene, blending with the candles until the city itself seemed to glow. Lena slipped her hand into his. He squeezed back, eyes shining. "5 minutes changed everything," she said. 5 minutes, he agreed. And a lifetime to make it matter. Together, they stood beneath the golden sky, no longer just survivors, but symbols of a truth too powerful to silence. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.